It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Stephen Maroulis, Master's in Science, Bachelor's in Science, the founder and CEO of Jarvis Analytics. He was born in Athens, Greece. He holds a Bachelor in Science and Computer Science from Sheffield Hallam University in the UK and a Master's in Science and Information Security from King's College in London, which has an amazing dental school. Stephen spent 10 years in the UK and moved to Dallas, Texas in 2005, where he still currently resides. He enjoys cooking and spending time with his family and the three four-legged family members, Waffles, Riley, and Dakota. His wife runs a nonprofit animal rescue, so he naturally asked me to put a plug into the show. You can visit earstexas.org and donate or find out more on how to get involved. Built with DSOs for DSOs, he maximizes efficiency across your entire organization, real-time actionable insights, practice management system is agnostic, automated DSO workflows, accessible anytime, anywhere on any device, HIPAA compliant, secure, scalable, cloud-based, trusted, and proven for DSOs. And what I've been trying to tell my homies is that, my gosh, steal from the best. Obviously, someone like Rick Workman who's managing 1,000 offices, or Bob Fontana running 1,000, or Stephen Thorne running 500. Obviously, these guys know more about operational logistics than somebody running their own. So it was an honor that, Stephen, that you decided to come on the show today and tell us what you know. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. Thank you for having me. The honor is actually mine.
Oh my God. It's so cool that you're from Athens, Greece. I just checked. We have 187 active dentists on Dentaltown from Athens, Greece. When's the last time you've been back to Greece?
I actually, so I was born in Greece. I left Greece when I was 18. It's obviously, since I moved here in 2005, it's kind of a long flight and there's no direct flights. You have to go either to New York or you have to connect through London. So it's kind of hard for me to make that trip now. I did go back 2 years ago. I believe it's 2 years ago. My wife will kill me that I don't know our anniversary, but I think it was 2 years ago that we got married back in Greece. So that was the last time I went.
Oh my gosh, it's hard for me to have sympathy for anybody's traveling stories after I lectured everywhere, and the worst one on the plane flight from leaving my home to getting to the hotel in Cambodia, 36 hours. I had to fly to San Fran, to Tokyo, to Hong Kong, to Kuala Lumpur, and then catch a connecting. Oh my gosh! And luckily, three of my boys went with me on that. And it just about killed them, so I felt better. I thought, okay, I'm just an old man, but even when they were young, God, by the time we got to the room, we were unconscious. You know, what's your, well, first of all, tell us your journey. How did you get into dentistry? How did you end up in the dental world?
So it's a little bit of a happenstance, but when you look at it back now, when I look at it back, I kind of think that everything fell into place at the right time and with the right people. So back in 2012, I started a marketing agency called Mesa 6, which is the name that I think Dr. V mentioned on the show when you were trying to Google it. And you're like, how do you spell that? And what does that even mean? And by the way, the name means media, because Mesa means media, but I had no idea that in Spanish, it also means table. So it was a really bad name to obviously pick for a marketing agency, Table 6, when I had in mind Media 6. So one of their first clients that we started working with, running essentially all their advertising and all their leads, their website and everything else, was a pain management group out of Tennessee that had 60 odd something locations. And when we took over the marketing, we kind of said, okay, it doesn't make any sense to allow people to get leads via email, and it doesn't make any sense for people to have to ask what happened to that lead and who worked on it and what's the results on our advertising spend and all those things. So that was kind of what pushed me to develop the very first version of kind of like Jarvis, which was a dashboard that would integrate with all these different sources. So it was essentially a CRM, a customer relationship management system, that all your call tracking, all your call leads, if you're running any paid search or any kind of advertising, it's a good idea to use call tracking. So all the calls would get recorded and would get posted on the dashboard, and all the form submits, which is what you have typically on a website, right? Book an appointment, instead of going to an email box that go into that dashboard. And we started thinking from a young age, I guess, and at that time, of how do we solve these complex problems, and how do we solve them at scale? Because like it's not like one little practice, it's like 60 plus, 65 I think at the time. So that was kind of like, okay, let's build something that people can log in, that they have different permissions, that have different views, and we can fully integrate with their Google ad spend or their Google Analytics or their call tracking and their form tracking. That was the very first version of Jarvis, and that's somewhere in 2012.
And then how do you go from there to dentistry?
So 2014, as luck would have it, here in town, there's obviously now we know that it's not, I don't know if it's the mecca of DSOs, but there's a lot of large DSOs here in the DFW Metroplex, and certainly in Texas. So I got introduced to a DSO group that had 22 locations at the time called Floss Dental, and we took over their marketing. So we basically implemented exactly the same thing we have done for the pain management with the dashboard. But over there, they were running Eaglesoft, and we started playing around with grabbing data out of Eaglesoft. Some basic metrics at start, like production, collection, adjustments, no KPIs. But again, trying to solve this operational inefficiency that existed, across the healthcare sector, if you will, at large. We saw it on pain management, and we saw it also on the dental side. I'll give you a simple example. You're walking into a patient, into a doctor's office, and somebody says, "How did you hear about us?" And then that goes into the practice management system. Well, that form now has to be disseminated in an Excel spreadsheet, pulled out of Eaglesoft, and sent to a marketing coordinator somewhere in a central headquarters. And it's a complete nightmare because it's full of errors, and it's a very manual, labor-intensive process, and it's not accurate a lot of the times. So we try to kind of like build systems and processes that automate all that. And that's what happened in 2014. By happenstance, again, the chief legal counsel was a gentleman named Justin Puckett, and Justin Puckett went to become the president of MB2 Dental. So Justin reached out to me somewhere around 2016.
Justin, wow.
Yeah. So Justin says to me, hey, I'm part of this DSO. They have 67 locations, and we want to basically build this platform. And I think it will be a great evolution from what you guys have done before. And I didn't have to think about it twice, because again, like from a computer science standpoint, I love solving complex problems. And again, that was a great challenge for us. We had to go and work with the team over there of very, very brilliant people. Justin Carroll, Dr. V, the entire, the Mara, the VP of IT, and the entire team over there are like extremely brilliant. And they had spent a lot of time in identifying their own operational inefficiencies and pain points in their processes, right? Because if you look at DSOs are essentially an engine. And that engine is human capital, but it's also processes, and it's also infrastructure. And I think Jarvis was that kind of like building block and the foundation of the infrastructure. And that was somewhere in 2017, I believe, February of 2017. We went live with MB2 Dental, and we had 67 locations. And that was like month one. They continued to grow. They went through the first recap event with Sentinel Capital Partners a little after, 10, 11 months after that. And, shortly after that, we kind of like pivoted and started working on another entity owned by Sentinel, which is Ultima Dental. So we kind of like went to Canada, even though we don't advertise that, we do work in Canada, and started working with another DSO that I think has now 62 locations. Came back, and the process, kept going on and continuously to evolve and solve different problems at scale.
So he was, Justin was the vice president of finance and chief operations officer for Floss. Floss
yeah,
Dental.
I think, COO or CLO, I don't remember, chief legal counsel, but that's where we're at, yes.
COO, VP of finance and COO. Is he, so who runs the MB2 more? Is it more Justin, or is it more Dr. V?
Wow, hard question. For sure, it's led by Dr. V, right? But Dr. V is very, very smart in that he has surrounded himself with very, very brilliant doctors and professionals, right? So he has, clinical doctors teams that work with him, integration teams that work with him. Justin Puckett is obviously a president over there. I think it's a combination. Definitely Dr. V is out there, and he's the, brains and image and face, if you will, of MB2, which is why he has created something different in the DPO space, for sure.
Yeah, we just had Dr. V on the program. That is a amazing thing. So, what are your, the $1 million question that individual older general dentists like me want to know is, when we were little, all the pharmacists owned their own land and building. They all owned their means
Mhm.
of production, and then they all got rolled up into Walgreens and CVS. Where do you see that process in dentistry? And where is it at now? Like in Arizona, we have the highest percent of dentists that work for a DSO. It's 18%. Five states
Mhm.
don't even have 1%. Where do you see this trend going, and how big will it get?
I think definitely, even though I'm not an expert in M&A, only by what I hear, from our clients, we know that I think that the ADSO says that we're about 20% consolidation. If you look at the total addressable market of around 125,000 practices is what I've heard. It's definitely consolidating, and it's consolidating fast. The question is it going to be 80% within 5 years, or is it going to be like 50% within 10 years? That I cannot foresee, but it's definitely growing. And there's very obvious benefits for dentists to be affiliated with DSOs. And at the same token, there's also a very big benefit for group practices to also be scaling up to become a DSO. So definitely there's consolidation, and it makes a lot of sense, especially as dentistry moves more into the kind of like retail friendly environment where the experience needs to be, very, very smooth.
And so when you started looking at the analytics, and let's go back to Floss Dental. They use EagleSoft. You say you're practice management software agnostic.
Mhm.
And that's a great business strategy because then you can plug into everyone. But what do you think the average dentist, who's half of them are using Dentrix, probably a quarter of them are using EagleSoft, and the fastest growing is Open Dental simply because it's open. But what do you think
Mhm.
are the shortcomings that the average person listening right now is a general dentist who owns his own office, or they're a dental student? But what do you think are the shortcomings of a Dentrix? Let's start with Dentrix. I mean, they have half the market. Could a general dentist compete with an MB2 franchise chain across the street running just Dentrix?
It's a great question. And I think, again, anecdotally from what I've heard, is that dentists are good at being dentists. And you cannot just take a dentist and turn them into a business person where now they have to think of payroll and HR and, tracking metrics nonstop and understanding how the performance works in the organization. So that's kind of like where MB2 and DSOs, DPOs have a very added benefit. It's kind of like the mentality of been there, done that, can optimize it, can scale it, and can run it flawlessly, right? Whereas a new aspiring dentist or a new dentist coming out of school right now, most likely is going to have, their own learning curve and challenges. So that to shortcut your success, if you will, right, you're going to have, it's kind of like taking an MBA class. They don't prep you for, for the entire of life or to go run, UBS, but it helps you understand a lot of the things. In terms of the PMSs, and it's interesting you mentioned, Dentrix and Open Dental and EagleSoft. And I just want to generalize it here and say, like, if you take somebody who graduates dental school right now and grew up in cloud-based systems with nice interfaces and mobile-friendly devices that use their iPad and their iPhone, and you throw them at any of those PMSs, they'll freak out and be like, "What is this? That looks like something from the 1980s." And that's the general consensus, I think, from most of these PMSs, because they were never designed for scale and they were never designed to be kind of like, in quotes, retail friendly. So definitely there is a huge learning curve, and they're not that easy to understand, which is why having something like Jarvis run on top, it allows you to have those actionable workflows, and it does make your front office life easier. And everybody can track their metrics and understand in a very clear, concise way where the practice is going and how the office is performing.
And how's Floss Dental doing now? How are they doing now?
I think Floss was acquired by Great Expressions at some point in 2017 or 2018. Yeah, so we don't work with Floss anymore on the marketing, and we have not reached out actually to Great Expressions regarding Jarvis, which is another interesting thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, because we haven't advertised. We haven't been out there. You may have never heard of me. I think you were kind of like trying to Google who is Mesa 6, who is Jarvis, what's going on, and this was kind of like by design, because we literally spent the last 3-4 years building with DSOs all these complex, modules and solutions to their problems. And I wanted to build a complete product and have it end to end before I went out and scaled our sales and advertising.
But that seems to be an interesting thing about the DSO industry. I mean, the exit strategy is just, I start with a VC guy that'll maybe give me 5 to 10 million, and then after 5 years, I sell to someone who'll do 50 to 100. Then it just keeps going on and on. How come the exit strategy is never an IPO on the Nasdaq?
It's a very interesting question. I think we might see some of those happening. I think you mentioned, I think you had our other friend, Ryan Hungate, Dr. Hungate, in your show the other day, and you guys talked about Smile Direct Club, right? And I don't know if you noticed, but I think Decca Dental did an announcement with in a collaboration with Smile Direct Club, and suddenly saw their price increase. So I'm not sure. At some point, I think as the private equity groups come back and back these DSOs, when you recap at 200-300 million, then your next recap is like at over $1 billion. At some point, I imagine you float and you go public. But
So I'm just curious, how old were you in the year 2000, the March 2000 Y2K meltdown?
I was 77. I was 23.
Okay.
And
were you interested in business then? I mean, do you remember like that was something you were really interested in at 23?
So it's really funny you say that, because I did actually my internship the third year in college at a pharmaceutical company called GlaxoSmithKline Beecham, GSK.
Yeah, who bought
and I was actually in
Sensodyne
UK.
from David. David. What was his name? Sensodyne founder. David Back.
I don't remember his name.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah,
I don't remember the name. But I was in UK, and I was actually in their R&D in Harlow, Essex, which was a very peculiar town for somebody that went from London suddenly to Harlow, Essex, because it was a very small town, but they had this massive headquarters. My job there was actually Lotus Notes applications development and tier 1 support for their internal applications. So one of the very cool things that they had developed was Amadeus, which was an electronic laboratory notebook. And the basic concept was that if you were running FDA, FDA is a very kind of like methodical process where you have to structure and record everything. And it used to be done on paper. And one of the things I worked on was essentially the digitization of that. So was I interested in business, and was I always in healthcare? Yes. Was computer my passion and always like found ways to solve complex problems? Yes. And funnily enough, in 1999, we were working on updating all the lab equipment to make it Y2K compliant. So it was a very big thing with gas chromatographs and all their analytical equipment that they were thinking it's going to stop working.
And so what is your unique selling proposition right now? Is it mostly DSOs? Is it mostly people who have multiple locations? Is that who's really paying attention? Is that who you're serving mostly right now?
So I think at the very beginning, when we founded Jarvis and where we've been so far has been the DSO. That has been our beachhead, and that's where we have a totally unfair advantage. Again, because we're building with DSOs for DSOs, and that has been our focus. Build something at scale, build something, identify all these small problems across all those DSOs. Have these amazing people, from clients that I have, Decca, Marquee, MB2. Encore, many others that help us see the world in a different set of eyes, if you will. So we started at the DSO, but we're definitely moving downstream, which I think is a lot easier. So we have developed a front office module that's kind of like something you'd use at a solo location, and we're in the process, I think, at the DEO, which is coming up in the next 2 weeks. We'll be making the announcement that we do have a solo product, which is for a solo dentist.
Wow. And the meetings, what meetings coming up? Where are you going to announce this?
The Dentist Entrepreneur Organization, the DEO event.
Mark Cooper.
I think it's the Mark Cooper, yeah. Jacob and Jacob Poole and Darren Nakopan, yeah.
Yeah, is that going to be virtual or in the flesh?
Virtual. I think it was the last one in June, I think was also virtual, and they did an amazing job out of, other shows I've seen. They did an incredible job with Zoom and how they pulled everything together. So we're very big fans of the DEO team and the cause and everything that they're bringing, the awareness, and the education aspect of on the dental industry.
It's so funny because when I was growing up and I got out of dental school, I only knew of Mark Cooper as the Swami. And whenever someone says Mark Cooper, my brain freezes because I'm like, Mark Cooper, who the hell's that? And then I think, oh, you mean the Swami.
Well,
So when is their meeting? When is their virtual meeting? I'm sure Mark wants me to plug it.
I want to pull it up right now. I think it's actually on the 13th. It's Friday, the 13th of November and Saturday. So I think it's a 2-day.
And what's the name of the meeting?
Event. It's the DEO. DEO. Yeah, Fall Summit, I think, 2020.
Fall Summit 2020.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because, gosh darn, I remember, 10 years ago, you go lecture in dental schools and the DSOs were going in there and, they could always get an audience with a bunch of free pizzas and they were telling them that individual practice is over and you got to join these guys and all that stuff. And the dental students were all fighting it against it. And, a quarter of the class, they have a family member that's a dentist. But now you go in there and it's totally changed. Now you go in there and the same number of students who used to be all against it, now they don't even want to be a dentist. They want to own a DSO. They're like, I said, like, what's your goal after graduation? They say the craziest baby things. They're so cute. One guy, I've heard several times some kids say, my goal is that 10 years out of school, I want to own 4 offices. And, it's just, it's really changing around. So it'll be interesting to see. I always, obviously all through history, linear thinking is a bad idea. So if something goes from 0 to 10, everybody assumes it'll go 10 to 20. A lot of the DSOs, they're 8 market penetration. What do you think U.S. market penetration is for a DSO right now? What would you guess?
I'd say 20 to 25%.
You'd say 25%, but it depends on the definition of a DSO. I mean,
exactly.
How many locations or more are you talking about?
So I think if you look at the DSO, had an interesting slide where essentially they said there were 1,590 so companies that are DSOs, if you will. And I think
many?
we're breaking
1,000 what?
590, so almost 1,600 DSOs is what they basically say. And then within that, you have different ranges. So you have kind of like the mega DSOs, which are national. I would imagine 100 locations plus. You have, 50 to 100, 25 to 50, and then 5 to, 20. So I think group practices, for sure, can also be loosely counted as DSOs because they're on their way to form that foundation that would become the DSO. And we certainly see that. We see out of the DEO events, especially, a lot of group practices, 5 to 25 locations, that they're again putting the foundation in place. They're always out there trying to engage and hire people and invest in infrastructure and systems and services.
But I was asking about the 2000 situation because business cycles. Joseph Schumpeter. I mean. My gosh, I was born in 62. That was the flash crash. I mean, graduating high school 80, that was a meltdown. 87, Black Monday. 2000, Y2K, Lehman's Brother. It just seems like it smells like that again. So if these DSOs have had this spectacular growth, but how do you think they'll look after a contraction?
It's definitely becoming very competitive, and that's what I hear from all the clients we talk to. And I think the multiples may have gone down a little bit, especially coming out of the COVID situation. But if you see and compare, I think the dental side, post-COVID to now, I think they've had a very, very good rebound. I mean, we obviously saw 1 or 2 months, the March and April, looking completely red. But I think May had one of the strongest months, followed by June, and bar any kind of like national mandate to shut down again, which I don't personally see it happening at this point. I think it's a very stable market. Yep.
And what was your source on the 1,590 DSOs?
It was the ADSO, and I'll be happy to send you the screenshot.
Send me the screenshot to howard@dentaltown.com.
Absolutely.
So what is your strength now? When you say dental analytics, workflows, marketing technology, dental market acquisition, industry consolidation, when I go to McDonald's, it's a Big Mac, fry, and a Coke. What's your Big Mac? What's your signature item, would you say?
Our signature item is basically Jarvis, which is a single unified platform that brings as a foundation those analytics, and then on top of that layers, workflows, KPIs, reporting, and additional modules that we have developed for our clients. Like for example, we have payroll module. MB2, when they were running payroll, they used to have 10 people running the payroll team, and right now, I think anecdotally, again, if they can correct me, I think they have 2 people running the payroll. Again, the payroll is a function of production, collection, adjustment, lab fees, and some logic around that. Well, that data resides in the PMS, and Jarvis sits on top of the practice management system. So we can actually create all these really unique and cool applications that take advantage of the underlying data.
So there's some big companies out there that do payroll for, Fortune 500 companies. Does this collect all the data, and then do you outsource it to a third party to do the payroll? And
correct. So we collect the data, but then we integrate essentially with ADP or Paychex or Payworks, in Canada. And they can import the CSV file that allows them to process payroll. We do not process the payroll, but we help them calculate the payroll, and we help them generate PDFs that show their providers how their payroll is calculated, bringing complete transparency into the process.
And ADP also, my gosh, they they got a solution for 1 to 50 employees, 50 to 1,000, 1,000 plus. What is it like working with ADP on this? Would you recommend them? Do you think they're good at what they do? What's been your relationship with them?
And another hard question. On my personal side, I'm not a huge fan of ADP, but that's me as, when we used to run ADP payroll out of the marketing agency. They're very easy to work with. They have APIs, which means they have ways that we can integrate into their products. And for sure, we know big DSOs that use ADP. And likewise other solutions. Again, we don't focus on how the doctor is getting paid. We're focusing on how much the doctor is getting paid and how that's calculated and how accurate that is.
It's the details in the numbers, and the docs just don't know the numbers. So how much does it cost? Let's cut right to the chase. So if someone's listening to this right now, and they're just an owner operator or one office, or maybe they got a couple associates. When are you going to have the solo software out?
The solo software is going to be announced, like I said, it is out, and we've been beta testing it internally and with 2 flagship clients that we have. I think it's going to be out in the next 2 weeks, and we'll announce the pricing then. I believe it's going to be somewhere around $300 to $350 per office per month.
$300 to $350 per office per month.
Mm-hmm. It's a SaaS-based pricing model.
And that's the base model. What features does that have? And then what features are value added that you pay more for?
So it's very comprehensive, and it gives you everything you need to do, everything you want for that one office. So starting off with KPIs, key performance indicators across hygiene, doctor, and office. It includes basically the concept of tasks and schedules, and the ability to look at essentially your key analytics like daily production, visits, your monthly production, how you're pacing, what are the scheduling opportunities. So kind of like breaking it in front of you in a very concise and easy manner in terms of like, okay, here's your scheduling opportunities. You have 86 broken appointments and 66 hygiene reappointments and what's the kind of like the hygiene recall due, if you will, right? Broken by buckets, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. What's your unscheduled treatment opportunity? And it extends to essentially tasks, which is front office reminders in terms of like patients that have not confirmed or patients that are missing insurance or any kind of data, and extends to collections, which is essentially a key component of running a healthy practice, which is to maintain, proper aging balance of, looking at patient balances, 30, 60, 90, over 120, what do your collections look like and what your adjustment percents look like. So it's a very comprehensive product that we're offering that I think will solve a lot of problems and definitely a need in the solo or even like 3 to 5 office space.
Well, I've always said this on the show, so I hope the kids listening this time get the point. But I've always said that if you see a product out there and it makes perfect business sense. It has nothing to do with clinical dentistry, root canals, build up crowns, all that kind of stuff. But business wise, it's just a no brainer. Then the DSOs always jump on it first. And I mean, look at all the people that jumped on this: Ultimate Dental, Blue Sea Capital, Chicago Pacific Founders, Deca Dental Group, Dentiv, Marquee Dental Partners, MB2 Dental, P4D Partnerships for Dentists, Centennial Capital Partners, Unified Dental Care, NAK. I mean, Today's Dental. Today's Dental. That's the name of my company.
That's funny.
Oh, it's Today's Dental Lexington. Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. But that's impressive. I mean, these are people that only do business, that raise money, that know their numbers, know their benchmarks, and they're on your solution. That speaks volumes. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I mean, again, it's a group effort. Like we listen to our customers very, very closely. We understand what they're trying to solve, and we help them solve those problems. And I think data is key. And just to quote, the chief clinical officer at the DECA, Dr. Rodney Alice, he said, when you go to the doctors, you cannot complain about production. You have to show them what drives production. You have to show them there's a color coding on Jarvis. There's a green, red, and yellow, and you can very easily show and say, hey, here's how you're ranking when you look at these clinical KPIs, and what can we do to improve it, as opposed to looking at just hard numbers and complain about the average production per patient, for example.
Yeah, and I agree. That's what I call that is an actionable KPI. I mean, who cares what your data is if it doesn't make you make a decision, change your behavior. You need data that makes you change your behavior. Let's start going through. My gosh, let's just go through the alphabetical. Account receivables. How does this help on account receivables, and what do you think the dentists listening to you should think more about? Because I know dentists. I mean, they love the clinical, but they don't sit around and think about their account receivables. But what did you find in that account receivable dental space, and what solutions are you adding to that?
So essentially, this is from the reporting side. You just want to make sure that obviously you have a very healthy, balance sheet, right? And your accounts receivable is balanced. So, obviously red flags when you're seeing things going over 90, over 120, over 180. And as I heard from, Melissa Marquez, our COO, that is probably one of the biggest hires we did back in January. She came from Dental One Partners and brings that extra kind of like dental experience. He was a COO on the Southwest region, and she's grown from every position to COO for 17 years. And I didn't know that over 365 claims, get denied by the insurance. So obviously, if you're having over 365 days claims, then those get denied. It's important to understand that. It's important to understand the responsible party. It's important to understand the breakdown between the patient and the insurance, and being able to actively monitor those before they become a problem. We have another report or another module called the waterfall module that shows you exactly the degree of collection. So you can see basically on the left-hand side, you can see what you're billing, and on the right-hand side, you can see what you're collecting. That helps you understand on a monthly basis what the trends look like. Am I collecting, 90%? Am I suddenly dropping to 78%? What is going on? And then drill down and find that actionable data that tells you what you need to do to solve those problems.
And what do you think account receivables should be? These big DSOs that you work with, what is their goal?
I'm not an expert on the accounts receivable side, but I can tell you that anything over 90 to 120 becomes a huge problem. The ability to understand what the patient balance is at time of collection is a big problem. So giving them visibility. And again, this is not just in dental, but I went to my dermatologist for my once a year annual checkup, and I go there. They had changed the billing system. I had received a paper notice that I had $185 balance from the previous year, and then I went there, did my visit, paid, and nobody said, "Hey, you have an uncollected balance from last year." So that's obviously $185 down. Multiply that times the number of patients and the number of providers, and you have a huge chunk of money sitting out there that you have no visibility. So I think that's kind of where we're empowering them to understand what the data looks like, and to collect in advance before it becomes a problem.
In people, time, and money. I mean, people is your most expensive thing. I still find it just insane that that even in my office in Phoenix, Arizona, we still have to confirm the who's eligible and all that stuff with Delta or insurance companies. We have to have a human call
To do
their
that.
office.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why isn't that done on the computer? Why isn't that done on an app? And it reminds you because, yesterday we had an election in the United States and everybody's talking about all these hoops and all get out the vote and all that. And they're saying all that when they got an iPhone in their hand that has facial recognition, voice recognition. So I go in to vote yesterday. You can't even make this crap up. And she said that I couldn't vote because my the address for it, which was my dental office, was a commercial property, and you have to have a resident property. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so I changed the address, and then she needed proof that I lived in this house, so I had to call Stacy, and she took a picture or something, sent it back, and I got all the way through. But it's like the reason it's so hard is because they don't want to make it easy to vote. And I think dental insurance companies are the same. They seem to be really good at collecting premiums, but they really try to slow down making claims. And it's pretty expensive. During the Obamacare days, everybody kept saying, the cost of shuffling the paperwork is 30%. And do you think it's going to get better?
I think for sure that's a sector that's ripe or begging for disruption. And I think the biggest players, like Delta and Cigna and some of the others, do have the APIs, which is essentially the application programming interfaces that you can connect to those systems and do insurance eligibility. And there's a few startups out there that are starting to do that, but nobody has cracked the code. Because again, you have 3, 4, the 80% of the insurance is big companies, and then the extra 20% is all these small companies, and it's very hard to modernize, if you will, or digitize and bring them as part of the network. But for sure, we will see innovation. I'm very proud when I talk to DSOs, big and very big or even small, and I was talking to one here in town the other day that they actually have 8 developers on their own in-house, and they were telling me that we love what you guys are doing at Jarvis because it just modernizes the industry. It just kind of brings it up to speed with what's going on out there, because traditionally there hasn't been a lot of innovation on the dental side, and I think that's starting to happen now.
So they just had a change in CEOs there. I mean, the CEO was Steve R. Olson, JD attorney, CEO, et cetera, and now they got a new guy, and it's James Wells Hutchison. I wonder if he'll have a new agenda of trying to get this done faster. Which company do you think is closest to cracking the code so that you could do claims verification all digitally, all that stuff, the easiest? Which company that you were talking about earlier? Which company is that?
So there's one company called Wonderful, ONEDERFUL, Wonderful.
Spell it again. ONE.
And then wonderful, but instead of the WO, it's one. So it's Wonderful. So I didn't know about them, and I'm not we're obviously now introduced, and we had a common customer, and we're in the process of doing an integration. But I think companies like Wonderful will continue to pop up and offer some kind of innovation on the insurance eligibility space.
So it's a dental insurance API, automate insurance verification and claims. The last Mark Cooper summer that we were just talking about Mark Cooper a little while ago at his convention, everybody was trying to just get cheaper labor and have it done in India. But it just seems like it should just be an API.
Automatic. Yep.
So you think it's you think that's on its way?
That's definitely on its way. I mean, it exists in other places, right? I mean, if you look at the other parts of healthcare, they seem to be much more advanced, other verticals, and that includes even places that you don't really have, payers like vet. The care credits of the world and our equivalents do have API. So I'm pretty sure that's coming in dentistry.
So it seems to me the backbone of the whole thing is the schedule. I mean, you just have people, you have your time, your schedule, and then you have people, time, and money. And it seems like the weirdest thing about dentistry is if you sell bottled water, you probably sell, you probably have a standard price. I mean, you just, you make something, you sell it. But dentists, they do a procedure and they sell it for 6 to 12 different prices. They all think they're on 3 or 4 PPOs, but they don't realize their PPO plans have contracts in there that they can sell
Right.
this arrangement and list. How many PPOs do you think the average dental office is on?
From I want to say north of 20 or 30 different payers.
Yeah. From the DSOs, when you're working with DSOs. So the DSOs are working with 20 or 30. So if general dentists are sitting out there thinking during the pandemic, you know what, they won't pay for the PPE, the health, that I'm just going to drop all insurance. Okay, well, the fastest growing organizations in America are not doing that. You just said they're north of 20, right? North of 20. So
I believe so. When I would look at payer reports,
Yeah, so these guys got 20 different prices. So if that was into the schedule, and let's say typical story, I'll go to a dentist and say, well, how much you get for an MOD composite on tooth number 3, first molar? And he'll say $250, and I'll say, how many PPOs are you on? And he's 4. And then you go look on the computer. It's like, okay, you're on 12 PPOs, and the composite MOD composite, you've agreed to do it for anywhere between 110 and 210. So you said 250. Where the hell does that come from? It's never happened. And then you sit there and you're doing it from 110 to 210. Well, at 210, if you had 50% overhead, you'd do it for free at 110, and you signed up for other plans at 110. And if that needs to come back to the schedule. So if I scheduled you for an MOD composite, and I scheduled an hour, and it knew my fixed costs, variable costs, and then over time, it could turn red and say, oh my gosh, you spent an hour doing this, you're going to lose $100. And then the receptionist could back it up to 30 minutes, and it says, okay, now you just made $10. So they don't really know their cost, which is based in time. And, so do you think this will help them, Jarvis will? On
so
the
it's
scheduling?
interesting. We're working on I think that's called the labor report, where you essentially grab your labor data out of ADP or some payroll system, because Jarvis tracks the provider data, but the front desk payroll, the rest of the payroll we don't do, right? So that exists in some other system. So we are working right now actually with taking that data out of ADP via API programmatically and layering it on a production report that shows exactly what that looks like. Data is kind of like everything, because without data, you cannot make any informed decision. And that's kind of like where Jarvis shines and gives you insights. Like, for example, when you're thinking of new patients, or when you're thinking of returning patients, nobody says, oh, hey, let me just figure out how to optimize that channel. Like, is Google bringing me more patients? Is their first visit production, 250 versus, 400 for Yellow Pages or some other kind of medium? Is my payer performing the same? What's my production per for new patient per payer, right? And then you'll see a huge variance, especially costs and different plans. How do I what's my payer source for returning patients? There's all these little pieces of information in there that help you make very, very informed decisions in how you optimize your data. We bring in, for example, your top 10 referrals, your top 10 payers, your top 10 employers by zip code. So when you run a marketing campaign or any kind of outreach program, you understand that, hey, in my area, I happen to have, a Josh Lawyer Insurance. I happen to have, Boeing. I happen to have some other employer. And now I can go in touch and be in touch with them and come up with an offer or a plan for their employees. And we see that also increasingly happening now, especially with on-site dentists, right, in throughout the United States.
Yeah, the best target marketing I did was my practice was open, and Southwest Airlines announced that they were going to move a hub from Dallas to Phoenix,
Right.
and it was big news all over the newspaper. And I kept that newspaper article on my office wall. And what I did is I found out what their insurance was. I called their headquarters and broke it all down, made this nice little letter, but I didn't know where these employees were going to be. And they said there was 2,000 of them going to start. And so finally one day, it was Friday, and I for lunch, I just drove to Sky Harbor, and I went to the Southwest Terminal, and I was telling my problem. And finally, this humble little old man works at the airport. He goes, well, I know we give them their paychecks in the mail room, and he showed me the mail room, and then he helped me. He took half of them, and he helped me stuff one of those flyers in each one of those 2,000 mailboxes. And pilots would come in, and they would say, is this where the Southwest Airlines pilots are supposed to go? And I was like, wow. Wow, that was just crazy. And then I tried to do it to the big company across the street from my office, which is Coca-Cola. And my gosh, they wouldn't even let you. They wouldn't let you on through the gate. It was security, this and that. So I went back and I revamped my deal where we made them. Made the offer. We did the whole thing like Southwest. We called Coca-Cola. We found out what their dental was. Did the whole thing, but then we sent it back with two of the youngest, these two little high school girls that got out of high school like 3, and they'd work our recall back then. I thought to myself, that security guy isn't going to say no to two little cute, adorable 16-year-old high school kids. And sure enough, that idiot let them through, and they put a flyer under every windshield wiper of that whole Coca-Cola parking lot, which was a C. And again, it's just like planting trees. I mean, once you get a couple of them growing, then you can start with the word of mouth referral to their colleagues and all that kind of stuff. I want to go back to the front office. My gosh, if they have so many tasks, and the dentist task, like if I scheduled you, if I knew on your treatment plan that Stephen needed an MOD on number 3, I know how much time the assistant sets up the room, but the front office is chaos. I mean, the phone might not ring for 30 minutes, and 5 of them call at one time. 5 people call on the phone at one time. You got people checking out, checking in. It's just complete chaos at the front. And because on People, Time, and Money, their time is based on entropy, and ours is based on scheduling, and it can't be done. So how do you help with that chaos? What I've always done is try to move as many functions to the back as you can, like, say, a hygienist. Okay, she just cleaned your teeth. She knows, she's going to make the decision. You want a 3-month recall, 4 months, 6 months. And then if you make that, you schedule it, because just having them walk up front and say, okay, do you want to schedule for my recall? Because the phone
doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
So if you know it's going to happen, you have to move it to the back. So how are you helping the front office?
So there's so you hit on a few very, very good points. Number one, that kudos to the front office people, that if they by any happenstance listening, you're doing an amazing job, and I don't know how you do it, because I'm kind of like high functioning and can do 50 things, but I've walked into front offices and I was like insanely humble. They open doors, check you in, pull up files, verify insurance, and they have like 2 phones on their head. So we're big fans of front office. So with that said, we don't want to make their job harder. We want to make their job easier. So what Jarvis does is it brings kind of like an order to that chaos, right? So we have a morning huddle that allows them to plan at the very beginning of the day, what the day looks like. They can compare today versus yesterday and versus tomorrow. And then moving on, we automate all of these kind of like tasks that you just mentioned. So your hygienist doesn't even have to go back and say, hey, select Howard and click 4 months. We automatically assign a task for somebody to follow up within 6 months, or whatever your preset number of days is. When they want to look up a patient information, instead of going to Dendrix or Open Dental or somewhere else and have to use that kind of like archaic interface, they have a very clean interface that they can start typing. If they want to create a report for recall or any kind of report, they can just go in and say, find me all male patients that are 22 years old, that have Delta Dental, that have an unscheduled treatment plan of $500. And within a few clicks, hit submit and get the results. So that's kind of like what Jarvis does for the front office. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, if you will, which, again, nobody's using them anymore. But that's kind of like what Jarvis is for the front office. It's not to add more tasks for them, because they're already going crazy with what they're doing. It's to simplify their life. It's to provide accountability, transparency, and show them how to do their job better, show them how to fill their schedule, show them how to collect more money from the patients, even nudge the doctors and see from a KPI standpoint, what does, for example, my patient retention looks like, what my case acceptance is, same day versus 30 days. We empower them to now take action, understand the data, and take action in a very, very simple and effective way, I think.
So when you look at DSOs, I always talk about this on the show, that, the standard deal where, hygiene capacity. If you have one hygienist, she works 50 weeks a year with 2 weeks vacations, and she only does 1 hour cleanings on adults, no kids or half-hour profies. She can only see 1,000 people for an hour-long cleaning twice a year. And then you start looking at the math on that, and I mean, my gosh, if you get just 20 new patients a month, you'd add a hygienist every 4 years, and obviously at 40 new patients a month, it'd be every 2 years. Do you see the DSOs better at getting a bunch of new patient traffic in, but failing as far as patient retention? Because when you go to a small family practice, whatever, I mean, it's a huge problem. I mean, it's just common to walk in practices all day long. They're 20 years old, and they've had the same hygienist working 4 days a week for 20 years while getting 30 new patients a month. And you're like, okay, how come you didn't add another hygienist every 2.75 years? How come you went 20 with the same one, which mathematically means that once you hit capacity, kind of like pouring coffee into a cup of coffee. Once that coffee is filled, and you're still pouring 30 new patients a month in it for 20 years, and 30 new old patient coffee grains have to come out. Who do you think the DSOs are tackling this problem better than small independent practices, just because they have more extended hours and more availability and more marketing? Or how do you see the overall problem?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, is a DSO better equipped at bringing new patients through the door? 100%. Because we're seeing right now this. When I first came here, like, you're looking at trying to find the best analogy, like pharmacies. Like, there's a pharmacist in Greece in every other corner, right? And now the same thing is happening with dentists here. There's a dentist in every other corner. And people think that like DSOs is this bad, wolf that comes and takes over and kills the industry and, doesn't offer anything in return. And I don't think that that's the case, because the DSOs understand very, very well through this complex infrastructure that they set up, that they can essentially turn this industry into they won't sacrifice the clinical excellence for their retail, readiness, if you will, of the dental, organization. They can still open an office, and they can still equip an office, and they can drive traffic to an office, and they can maximize, the performance of that office without sacrificing the clinical excellence. And I've seen that from many of our clients, and which is why you'll see their chief clinical officers are extremely hands-on on Jarvis, measuring KPIs, understanding number of extractions, POs, root canals across all the providers, and coaching them on how to provide, better and clinical care. So I think for sure DSOs understand better how to scale, and for sure DSOs understand how to bring new patients. And we've seen, DSOs now being hyper local, in that they don't just run, Google ads and just blanket the market with like, hey, number one dentist. They're actually getting involved in community events, and are sponsoring, local events at their community. That drives also those local patients. So I think DSOs bring definitely a sophistication and to the dental side, and definitely shouldn't be seen as something bad.
When you say with an overview of MTD financials, is MTD month to date? Is that what that is?
Yes, sir. Month to date, yes.
Okay, month to date. And the financials include breakdowns by business line: GP, oral surgeon, perio, endo. Again, I just want to remind the kids out there and that the DSOs are moving away from general dentists doing molar, endo, and placing implants. And we all did that. And you get some young kid out of school, and you send him to some implant deal, and he goes all the way, to Dominican Republic. He learns how to place these things. He comes back, works for you for a year, and he places one a month for a year. And then he jumps onto another job, and over the next 5 years, you got to pay a periodontist to redo half of them. So having an oral surgeon or a periodontist place the implant gives you two things. Number one, the expertise is a lot better. Doing to others, you want done to yourself. I'd rather have a periodontist who placed 10,000 implants place mine than someone who graduated an hour ago and just got out of a program. Number two, my gosh, the dental insurance parties, third parties, they're paying these guys a lot more money. So if I do a molar root canal at my dental office, I'll get $650. But if an endodontist came in there, he might get $1,000 or $1,200 from the same insurance company. So it's going to last long. And then with the lawsuits, lawyers, they'll go after a general dentist all day long, because their first thing they're going to say is, well, he should have referred it. But if you're looking at an endodontist and the root canal failed, they're like, well, he did all he could. So it decreased your lawsuits, it increased your success rate. The finance is about the same. How long have you been in dentistry specific?
So since 2017. But I've been like really, I was like thrown on the deep end.
Yeah.
Who wasn't? I'm in 2016.
Those you were going to email me that slide of 1,590. How many of those DSOs do you think? How many of those DSOs do you think have already implemented that molar endo and implant? Molar endo is done by endodontists, and implants replaced by a periodontist or an oral surgeon. Is that?
I don't have a number that I can throw out there, but I mean, I definitely see now, because we track performance. We used to track, production, and then, like the more sophisticated DSOs, like you said, want to break it by line of business. So they want to understand, always perio endo, and I think, and Invisalign in some cases, even break it out. So I think for sure the demand is there, and I've seen, DSOs measuring performance by business line. So I'm pretty sure that it's something that's happening as we speak.
Yeah, and that's why Arizona is the ground zero, because right now we're the only state that accepts a dental license from any other state. We accept all of them, and that'll change. Like on this last election yesterday, Arizona became the 13th state to legalize marijuana, and that's been years slowly to get to 13 states. I think as far as other states honoring other dental medical licenses from all the other states. I don't know when that's going to come, but right now that's one of the key drivers of Arizona DSOs is they want to solve the problem of finding a bigger supply of endodontists and periodontists and oral surgeons. And by the way, if you're in the pandemic year at dental school and you don't know if you want to come out or stay in school, my gosh, the oral surgeons, I mean, their base salary out of school, $350. Crazy. And then they'll get paid 40-50% of production. And I know some first year out of oral surgery school make net $750. It's just crazy. I'm going to go into those KPIs, key performance indicators. You have 50 KPIs. My gosh, that's a lot of KPIs. Do you list those out somewhere?
We have them broken by, hygiene, doctor, and office KPIs. We don't have a list on the website. We're in the process of actually revamping, and one of the things we're going to be having is that. But I can tell you, for example, like things that people are looking at, definitely, case acceptance same day versus rolling, 45, 60, or 90 days, same day treatment per new patient. Obviously, the average production per doctor appointment, the average doctor production per hour. When you move into the office KPIs, very, very important to look at patient retention, the number of treatment plans presented, the no-show rate. And if you move into the hygiene, again, it goes back into, perio appointments, number of sealants, production per patient visit, average production per day, and the list goes on. I did send you the screenshot, by the way. The picture of the 16.
Yeah, current industry snapshot. Thank you for that. 1,615 DSOs nationally. Local ADSO emerging in Tier 1, 1,500. 3 to 5 practices, 900. 6 to 19 practices, 600. Regional 2 ADSO, Tier 2, 90. National ADSO, Tier 3, 25. ADSO member market share penetration, local ADSO 2%, regional 13%, national tier 56%, international 10%, nonprofit 1%, and that was at a Mark Cooper, the Swami's meeting. You said that you got that.
It was actually at the ADSO, and I had one of our clients send me that. It was actually Dr. Solman from the founder and CEO of DECA, which is also a close friend. Again, happenstance, also in Dallas, and he sent me that. And it's actually probably a year old, I believe, because I don't think the ADSO had a show this year. So it was definitely from the year before.
Yeah. So, by the way, how did you come up with the name Jarvis? Where does that come from?
I cannot claim. Yeah, you had. It's Dr. V, right? So, and I can never say anything because he came up with it. He's a huge Marvel Comics fan, and if you go to his office, you'll see he has, I think, Iron Man in a kind of like 6-7 foot statue outside, and the name and their logos, match, the colors match that of Iron Man. So he came up with a name, and then something interesting happened. We tried to call it, dashboard. We had Mesa 6 dashboard, we had dental analytics, and nothing would stick. And everybody would say, hey, I went to MB2. I heard from, Dr. V, we saw this thing called Jarvis. Can we have Jarvis? So that's kind of like where the name comes from, to the point that, the other day at the office, we had a little a party for Halloween, and somebody put an online quiz on our team, put it up here on the screen. And one of the questions was, who came up with the name Jarvis? And I think there were 2 names in there. It was like Dr. V and then Dr. Alice from Decca. And the correct answer was, of course, Dr. V. So it's a little inside joke.
So is Jarvis a Marvel comic character?
Yeah, I think he was the assistant, the AI assistant to Iron Man. So, and that's so fun. Yeah.
So, what is your what are you excited about? I mean, we're in November, we're in the middle of a pandemic. How has the pandemic helped you? I agree that the pandemic has affected everyone differently. Number one, it really built the brand of DSOs. I mean, on Dental Town, we've had classified ads, free classified ads for 20 years, and there's always about 1,000 dentists selling their practice and about 5,000 job opportunities as a dental associate. The pandemic comes along, and so many dentists over 60 said, forget this, I'm selling. And so the number of selling went from 1,000 to 2,000, and the jobs available went from 5,000 to 1,000, and the 4,000 that disappeared were all the solo private practicing dentists, and the 1,000 that stayed was the DSOs. And like in Arizona, that's why I wanted Dr. V to come on, because I got 2 dental schools here, and they're all texting me and emailing me. I'm looking for a job, and the only ones that are hiring are DSOs. So it's Pacific, it's Aspen, it's Heartland, but MB2 is hiring the most and the fastest, and that's why I got them on the show. So how has this affected you in your company?
So I think that so thank God we did not have any cancellations. We didn't have any drop in revenue, if you will, in many ways, because I think people, if anything, 2 things happened. Our business increased at the same time, because I think it was immediately apparent that you need data to make informed decisions. And a lot of group practices and some DSOs had postponed those decisions. And the fact that Jarvis is available, they came and they reached out to us. And then secondly, again, it was a really good time for some of those groups that were busy operationally to review something like Jarvis. Didn't have the time. So we had actually, again, an influx of new customers that we onboarded during the pandemic. It helped us in other ways that we tried to kind of help and help back our customers, was to develop very specific courses. Like we have, for example, Jarvis University, which we're in the process of revamping. But we set up immediately a COVID-19 response center that we kind of announced. Melissa put together this amazing Jarvis recovery plan. So she basically gave tips on how to keep your practice open for emergencies. The patient portal, how to access the patient database and find those patients, to reach out to them, to reschedule, the ADA COVID-19 resources. The cancellations view that allows you to understand exactly how many cancellations you had in terms of count, dollar amount, and how many of those were rescheduled. So we had to come together very, very fast and put together resources for our clients to make their life easier during that difficult time.
And where do you think we are on the time deal? I mean, the CDC declared or the World Health declared it a pandemic in March. So it's April, May, June, July, August, September, October. 7 months have passed. We're into November. What does it look like to you? And where do you think this virus is at and its effect on the economies? I mean, the ADA was saying, there's 12 months in a year. So if we had to close down 2 months. So 2 divided by 12, I mean, shit, your numbers have to drop 16.66%. Then the ADA numbers were first saying that the industry contracted about 30. Now a lot of people are saying that for the year 2020, the U.S. dental market will have officially contracted about 38%, and they're predicting next year at 20%. Do you agree with those numbers? What do you think of that forecast?
I cannot tell anything about. I cannot really tell you about what the market would contract to, but I can tell you that the smartest DSOs that we obviously work with, and a lot of others, I would imagine, that have a plan in place, they have the data in place to make very, very informed decisions in terms of hygiene recall. in terms of treatment plan optimization and bringing patients, through the clinics immediately when they open. So that would be May and June, which is why we saw very high spike of new patients, in the months of May and June. Personally, I mean, as you can see, I think that we're like long ways from getting over this. I was talking to the managing healthcare partner at KPMG, based out of Cleveland, I think, and he was telling me that KPMG told them they can't go back to the office until 2022, which is insane because originally we heard it was going to be back September this year, then we heard kind of like June next year, and now you're hearing this anecdotal evidence of 2022, and I think that's very, very scary. But I think absence of a shutdown, everything is going to be okay. I also think that shutdown, those 2 months, helped many DSOs and practices to focus on increasing their collections and catching up with a lot of back office tasks that they had left behind. So you see this kind of like paradox where the revenue increased, but the new patient count decreased, but it was so exponentially more the revenue that in some practices they didn't really feel it. Again, assuming that there's no other shutdown, I think we're in very good shape.
Well,
and,
I
you
don't.
need to go to your dentist.
I'm convinced, they cannot shut down dental offices again. They did it the first time. It's a novel virus. They'd never seen it before. They erred on caution. They shut down, but the dentist did not like that at all. And we've been preparing for these pandemics, starting with HIV back in 1979, and you just can't compare closing down a restaurant and a movie theater and a bar to closing down a dental office that spent $100,000 on a infection control and their doctor. So I don't think that's going to happen again. But do you? Because I know it's the biggest fear on guys' mind.
I don't think so. I don't see that happening, and I think there's now been there's been a lot of communication as to the extent that the dentists help from not overcrowd the hospitals, right? And I think there's a very clear correlation on the benefits of going to your dentist. So I don't see that happening.
So
again,
the DSOs were the first ones to get back to their 100% run rate. I know my friends at the DSOs that they're already back over their pre-pandemic monthly rates. What do you think it is? In fact, Rick Kirshner owns 350 Comfort Dental's even asked me, he goes, what would you think it is? And I said, well, obviously it's operational logistics. You're just great executors. But what do you think
100%.
You think that's all it was, operations and logistics?
100%, because they have the data, they can shift through the data faster, make better informed decisions. I was having this discussion with another one of our clients, which coincidentally came also from Dental One. His name is Keith Miller, and he was the COO of Dental One also for 13 years, and he's now the CEO of a group called Partnerships for Dentists here in town. And he was saying, when you look at scheduling, why do you want to bring in someone that has broken appointments, which makes a lot of sense, right? So something as simple as as I'm shifting through my list, why don't I just focus on intelligently adding people to my calendar, to my scheduling, and bring them back, as opposed to haphazardly, hey, first opening, yes, I signed up, I want to come, add me. So small things like that with the data, you can make the right informed decisions, and you can optimize your schedule, which again goes back to what you said, logistically. The infrastructure is there and the team is there to go and execute.
So when you said partnerships for dentists, were you talking about Keith Miller? Is that who you were talking about?
Keith Miller, yes. Keith Miller, yep.
Is it, and how are they doing? They're right in your backyard too. They're in Dallas.
They're in Dallas too. It's just, I had no idea, like moving here in 2005, that if you ask me, 15 years later, there'll be a bunch of dentists and DSOs and you'll be working with them that I have no idea. I think they're doing fine. They're also growing, and that's an emerging trend we've seen with all our DSOs, whether they're growing by acquisition or whether they're growing with de novo, by de novo. I mean, they are growing.
So I want to go back to where you cut your teeth, which was Mesa 6, right? Is that how you say it? Mesa 6? That's where you cut your teeth. Again, I was wondering, I just asked about during the pandemic, the DSOs were the first to get back to their pre-COVID run rates, and we both agreed it was just execution, operation, logistics. But back to marketing. Do you think their execution, access to finance, you think those are their strongest points, or do you think marketing is their strongest point? I mean, where would you put marketing on the four horse legs of these DSOs that are running the fastest?
I mean, it's very interesting. Obviously, marketing is a key component of any successful practice, mainly because you have to bring in new patients and you have to retain existing patients, and you have to do that hand in hand. And if you're failing at retention, then you have to increase the rate by which you bring in new patients. Sophisticated systems, again, it goes back into infrastructure, working with the right partners and understanding the traffic sources, which in layman's terms is, as I've explained before, I said, okay, if you place a one-page ad at, a golf magazine, or if you place a one-page ad at a local newspaper, where are you going to see the higher conversion rate? Well, empirically, you might think it's a golf magazine, but unless you actually go and track it and you have the mechanisms to track and prove it, it's just an intuition, right? And what the DSOs do is they move the intuition or the guessing out of the way, because they operate based on facts, and data gives you facts. So for sure, we see DSOs, work with DECA, work with MB2. We offer this marketing matchback, which is essentially an add-on module on Jarvis that does first-party attribution. That essentially takes a lead as it comes in from any source, whether it's paid, online, offline, phone call, TV, billboard, and can match it up to an actual patient. And that's how they can optimize their marketing spend. They can understand that each channel yields different results. The first visit production is different. The latency is different. The readmission rate is different. The number of patients without broken appointments varies amongst the channels. So I think that it's a science, and for sure, the more time and money and effort you put into it, and if you have the data and the systems, you can excel at it. And there's no question about that.
My gosh, I could talk to you for 40 days and 40 nights. There's just so much that, you hit on everything that's correct. Same day treatment. I can't stress enough that when you go around for 30 years and you just see some of the most rocking hot practices, and a lot of them are in the middle of nowhere, and then you see just the average office, the ones that really do the most, they have a culture of hustle. Someone calls in, they get a cancellation, and they pull someone off hygiene. They do same-day dentistry. You get a cancellation, but you just did 2 hygiene checks, and you didn't even offer that person to have it done today, and you just tell them to go up front and reschedule. It's a staff that's all entitled. You're all entitled to lunch. No one at the hospital's entitled to lunch. No one's entitled to dinner. You got an emergency in the emergency room. My gosh, policemen, they can't pull you over and say, oh, I actually go to lunch in 10 minutes. Firemen don't do it. The only person that does it all day long is dentist. And then when you tell them, well, why don't we work through lunch? They look at you like I'm an alien. It's like, really, dude? What went wrong in your childhood where you can't work through lunch? Furthermore, the empathy, look at her. She's in pain. She's in pain, right, and you're going to reschedule her. And then when they say, well, that I never do that in my office, just like all the general dentists, you'll never meet a general dentist that ever had a root canal fail. So I assume the 4,000 endodontists who are doing 4 to 5 molars a day, 5 days a week, they're only working on immigrants that fly here with a toothache, because the locals never had a failure rate. And they say, oh, we see all of our emergencies. Dude, 8.5% of the emergency room visits are toothache. So somebody's not seeing their dental emergencies. Do you think the hours of availability that group practice provides is probably the fundamental secret sauce of group practice, DSOs?
I think we used to joke, or I used to hear that joke where they said, everybody wants to double production, but get that closed on Fridays and Saturdays. So it's like, okay, well, if you want to double production, well, you should be open on a Saturday. So for sure, I think opening hours have something to do with that, but it's also the operational efficiency. And it's also having the data and understanding exactly something that you mentioned, like number of retreats or number of warranties or number of procedure counts per provider. Because I think when you start to dissect the data, it tells you what's going on. It's not emotional. It's like you can see that one provider has many, has less procedures. One provider has, more warranties done. One provider has a different production per hour, and you can pinpoint exactly the pattern. And that's what kind of like using tools like Jarvis, which large DSOs and group practices use, allows them to have that insight.
So, some kid's listening to you right now, and he's 5 years out of dental school, and he's worked at 5 different practices. They change jobs every year, just like they do at the FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Netflix. It's everywhere. Yeah. It's more of a thing with millennials where they're just like my uncle that lives up the street from me. I mean, he got a job at Mobil Oil in the mailroom when he was 16 and retired from there when he was 65. And my gosh, when he filled out his application that asked him a checkbox, do you want us to withhold 3% of your check for your retirement fund? And he's 16 years old in Parsons, Kansas, trying to marry my aunt. And he said he thought for about a second, goes, yeah, why not? That why not was several $1 million later. But from Japan to America, that's just not going to happen again. They're not going to work for, they're just not going to do that. But they've had 5 different offices, but they've already worked on Dentrix and EagleSoft and Open Dental and all that kind of stuff. But they probably see it from their personal framework, how they liked it, putting notes, all that kind of stuff. But for the business of dentistry, which one of those 3 would you recommend? Or does that cost you channel conflict? And if you answer, piss off a bunch
it doesn't
of people.
cost. I mean, a little bit. No, I mean, I'll tell you that, like in our customer base right now, when I look at the percentages, I definitely say, Dentrix, I think, is number 1. Second one, I say, Open Dental and growing, and the third one I say is EagleSoft, and that's for sure. And then you have cloud-based PMSs like Denticon and others that are also growing.
But okay, so you said Dentrix was 1, and you said Open Dental was 2.
Open Dental, I think, is 2 from the numbers I pulled in the other day when I was looking at it.
So it was always Patterson's EagleSoft and Shine's Dentrix. So it looks like Open Dental has now passed, based on what you're seeing, they passed Patterson's. Where is it right there?
EagleSoft.
EagleSoft in Effingham. So why do you? But if you had to pick just between Henry Schein's Dentrix and Open Dental, which one of those do you like?
I've heard conflicting views, and I'm not a dentist, so I cannot really tell you, on charting. I mean, I really cannot tell you. I think it comes down to the preference of where you were trained and what you want to use. I think they're Henry Schein is obviously a very big company, with well funded and has developed this product, which is, fully integrated and ever evolving. There's also a cloud version of Dentrix called Ascent, which I think they're putting a lot of emphasis now, which is designed for multi-location environment. I don't have a preference per se. I mean, I've heard obviously the big benefit of Open Dental is that it's open and you can go download it and you can customize it and you can do all kinds of things. And there's definitely innovation happening in that space, using Open Dental as a blank kind of like canvas, if you will, like an Excel, where you can pull out data, right, and customize it in your own way. I say that, and that's what we've seen for most of our DSOs is, we have a DSO, for example, that runs 90 plus locations on one PMS, and it happens to be EagleSoft. Without naming them, I mean, you can infer who that might be. And here comes location number 1, and they had to acquire, and that location ran Open Dental. So at that point in time, you have to make a choice. What do? Do I convert PMS? Do I let them go on? Do I now train on 2 different PMSs? What do I do? And I think the answer, from what we've seen and heard from other CEOs, is kind of like the do no harm approach, which is if the plane is flying, don't try and change the engines. You can do it. You can possibly refuel the plane, and we see that happening with fighter planes. But I don't know that you can go change the engines as is happening. So there is no safe way to go convert the PMS out of a clinic, and it's fairly disruptive. It's disruptive either to the dentist, it's disruptive to the front office, and it can be disruptive, especially when the data that you're migrating is not being ported, like aging, collections, RCM stuff, right? So I say leave it as is and use Jarvis on top, which is exactly what Jarvis was designed to do. It was designed to be agnostic. So when one office, or Dentrix counts new patients as one definition and Open Dental counts new patients as another definition, now we have the DSO making the decision and say, you know what, I don't care what Hendricks and Eaglesoft or Open Dental say about the new patient. I want my new patient definition to be first walkout plus an attached procedure code plus this particular provider minus this particular payer, and we can totally customize and offer that to them. And that's where Jarvis and and kind of like this intelligence layer adds to the PMS. It's something that the PMS is lacking, something that you don't want to disrupt, and something that can still yield better results without having to disrupt, the underlying core.
And what numbers would you give for average? One of my deals is that dentists or solo practitioners are all by themselves. They're listening to this podcast alone in a car driving to work or on a treadmill. So I try to bring them the macro view down to the individual view. What do you think the average median modal first visit revenue is for the average patient in America, or first year revenue, or even the lifetime value of the average median patient?
The LTV I have to pull up somewhere in an anonymized fashion. I think the first visit production, again, depends between hygiene and general dentistry. General dentistry has to be somewhere north of 270, 280, and we've seen
what was that for first visit revenue, or?
I think so, yeah. The average visit per production. I'm sorry, the average visit per production needs to be somewhere in that range, 270. 240, 270.
And what percent of the dentists in America listening to me right now know how much their operatory costs them for an hour? I mean, it's so easy. Most dentists are very stable. They've been doing the same 16 days a month with the same team. Most dentists listening right now have worked the same hours with the same team for the last 3 to 5 years. So you just take your monthly cost divided by the number of operatories you have times the hours used, and they don't even know their costs. And that was my point earlier. So if I schedule someone into this room for an MOD composite, she doesn't know what that room costs for an hour. Let's say it was $150, and then she just scheduled an hour to do an MOD composite, and doc's getting paid $130 for that, and everybody in the office thinks they're getting paid $250 for that. From the hangover days of back in time, I don't know, but they just don't know the basic numbers. And that's why DSOs are doing so well, because I podcast interviewed almost all those DSOs. By the way, if you know any other of those CEOs of the DSOs on your list that want to come on the show, I love to get them on, because if I'm going to talk about root canals, I want to talk to an endodontist. If I'm going to talk about oral surgery, I want to talk to an oral surgeon. Now, I'm going to talk about the practice management business of dentistry. I don't want to talk to Doc. He can't answer any question about his numbers. But these DSO people have been very, very enlightening. But what percent of the general dentists do you think know the cost of their operatory per hour?
I have no idea, but I would imagine without some tool or basic insight, I'd be imagining a small percent.
Well, you know who it is, because you saw him fly by the window on a unicorn. Remember, they were waving. It was my gosh. So, hey, on those KPIs or whatever, if you could run any report or anything you want us to put in the notes, and when we post this on Dental Town, or any follow up to where we are, was there anything you wanted to talk about today that you thought I'd get to and we didn't talk about?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered pretty much everything. I'm going to have Melissa Marquez, our COO, pull together some list of KPIs and send you over some kind of averages, which will be a good indicator for the listeners and the members of Dental Town.
Yeah, again, Doc, I love you, because I would want to go to a doctor that was always thinking about my bonding agent on my filling and my occlusion and my TMJ. I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a dentist. That's why I love dentists. But if they just didn't have the interest, what percent of the, last but not least, what percent of the dentists do you think have an interest in the business of dentistry?
I would imagine you hit it right in the head, unless they're aspirational. You said majority of the new students want to be owning 5-10 offices within 10 years. So I would imagine there's a renowned interest in business of dentistry, and I think that's because there's plenty of success cases all around. Again, I think MB2, when we started working in 2017, 67 offices to 280 right now. I think they acquired 75 offices last year. Decade Dental, from 12 to 13 offices back in 2014 to pushing 100 right now. Opened 25 de novos in 1 year. It's astronomical numbers. and it takes a lot of insight and precision and operational infrastructure to hit those kind of numbers. So I think being out there and the younger people, I think, look up to Dr. V, to Dr. Solman, and they do want to become people that understand the business of dentistry.
And moving forward, just the immediate next 5 to 10 years, do you think DSOs are going to move more towards de novo or mergers and acquisition?
I think that the DSOs that have been de novos are now aspiring to also add acquisitions, and I think the ones that have been doing predominantly acquisitions now have a lot of weight under the wings where they can confidently go out there and open the de novos, which my understanding it's a pretty hard job and a big lift, especially the first year, right? So I think it's going to be a mixture of both. With retiring dentists, there's obviously the opportunity to acquire. But I think the market will continue to demand both.
Well, that was a segue for what I wanted to say is let's just go back to Lehman's Day. I mean, I've lived through the Y2K here in Phoenix, and I lived through 10 years later the Lehman's Brother, and I guarantee you, both of those events took down about 85 offices each in Phoenix, and you could divide them in half. Half of them were the high-end market, all the exquisite, taking out all their old dentistry and doing a $25,000 an arch smile makeover that you learned at LVI or whatever. Because remember, rich people, they all do the same thing in common. When you give them cash, they try not to part with it. You can the easiest IQ test in the world, just hand someone $100 and shit. Most of them will just take it and immediately drive straight to the mall and buy a pair of shoes. And so when the market contracts, the high-end money disappears because smart people know cash is king and they don't part with their money. And the other half was the guys who just started and they were thinking, oh, here's my marketing plan. I should get a 1% response for doing this many mailers. And marketing just died, especially after Lehman's Day and Y2K. Nothing worked in marketing at all for the first 6 months. So I would think, looking at a very high chance of that, we're going to have a pandemic recession because it looked like we were going to have a contraction before this thing even broke out. And then it's been stalled by, $3 trillion of printed money stimulus by the Fed. But when all this stuff rains down to earth and we do have a contraction, de novos is going to be the highest risk versus a mergers and acquisition of selling. And there's so many older dentists now that this is the last straw. They just want to sell. And like I say, we had 1,000 officers for sale in Dental Town. Now there's 2,000. So it looks like, I don't know, I would do M&A activity before de novos until I was more solid on this economy. But hey, man, thank you. So, last question: where do you see yourself being in 5 years? What's your 5-year plan? How will Jarvis look in 5 years?
I think we're going to continue to innovate and consolidate and offer, innovative solutions that would include, we just launched scheduling, online scheduling right now. We're looking into essentially rolling out patient communications and essentially making Jarvis the central universe, the hub of a healthy, growing practice. So instead of having 50 different practice management systems and different services, Jarvis becomes that core. We're not going to be developing a practice management system, but I want to be that layer on top of that practice management system and offer 360 kind of like services.
And where's all this programming being done at? Is it Asia or Dallas?
So we have so both actually. I have a team in Philippines, have a team in Abu Dhabi, and have a team here. So it's 3 different
so
places.
you have your programming spread over Iligan City, Philippines, Abu Dhabi, and Dallas. What is the pros and cons of having programmers in 3 different places? Is it expertise? Is it cost? Is it covering 24 hours in a day to answer the phone? What is the function there?
It's interesting you say that because it's not we don't outsource per se. I'm not a big fan of outsourcing because outsourcing and working on a per project basis builds zero human capital, right, and understanding. So I think that having teams that are diverse, they have completely different skill sets, they see things differently, and when you have that 1 + 1, it equals 4, and it truly happens. So That's the benefit. The cons is obviously, the time zone difference, where essentially, I have been known to work 24 hours a day. But there are not that many cons. I mean, it's just actually people coming together with very diverse backgrounds, with very diverse skill sets, and solving very, very complex problems.
And what is the language, the programming language? What language did you do this whole thing in?
It's interesting. So the connector, which is what extracts the data, is written in C#, and it's a Microsoft, Windows technology. For the front end stuff, we use open source components, so Angular, Vue.js, and our HIPAA compliant infrastructure runs on Amazon Web Services, on Aurora R5 databases. But it's pretty much open source. I'm a very big believer on open source and not down the camp of Microsoft, or Java and others.
And I didn't hear you say like Python or anything. Do you see AI being a big component moving forward, or is that a lot of hype and not really practical?
Definitely. So we use Python for testing and data extraction. So when we automate testing to make sure our data ties to the practice management system, we use Python. We use Golang for automating certain scripts and extractions again. AI is definitely here and is definitely coming. And essentially, when you look at it from the X-ray standpoint, the ability to diagnose X-rays en masse and at scale, definitely see a big play there. In terms of AI on what we're doing, there's obviously things like TensorFlow and different camps where essentially what you're doing is you're training data, right? You put enough data and you train it to predict the outcomes. So the most obvious example of that would be scheduling, where you can build AI models to simulate, scheduling, production, collection, and different scenarios, but also your marketing spend and kind of like the results of the marketing. So for sure, we're implementing AI into our products, but it's not just going to be on the clinical side; it's going to be on the operational side.
Yeah, that was interesting. My gosh. Well, hey, my gosh, you have so many, so much to future. I mean, you're in the sweet spot, and that is digital data. And if you kids out there listening, I got to remind you that when I was little, my mom, she thought me and all my siblings had to take piano lessons and, all this other stuff. And when I had my 4 boys, I thought, well, I'm not going to make them take piano lessons. I hated piano lessons. But I made him take computer lessons. And I found this programmer. It was 4 boys. And he was a guy, and he was really cool, and they loved him. And for 4 years, every one of those boys, he'd come over and do an hour with each one. And I just said, well, just make it fun. Don't ruin it now. And so, they first got interested in video games and this and that. But now, one of them is a professional programmer. But my gosh, if you got kids out there, drop the piano lessons and go into coding, because I seriously think, when I read things that like in 1880, they say 90% of the world was illiterate because they couldn't read or write. It's like, okay, well, first of all, go back to 1880 to the next 50 years. I mean, that was the most amazing times in the world, and now some idiots saying they were all illiterate. Well, just because you can't read, you're not illiterate, but you did have a point. They couldn't read. And I think the same thing can be applied today. Right now, it's 2020, and 90% of the world doesn't know the language programming. And if you want to be bilingual, if you already speak English, well, English is the language of science, and math is the language of science, and English is the official language between scientists. But if you want a third language, make it a programming language. And my God, if you can speak English, math, and one program language. If someone's listening out there right now and they're a dentist and they're a hobbyist and they want to start learning this because they're on Open Dental, I mean, my God, if you're on Open Dental, you can literally go in there and customize this whole thing. What language would you recommend a doc learn? What would be the first language a dentist should?
It's interesting you say that because my first inclination is to say anything for iOS. Because obviously we've seen Apple penetrate mobile devices, tablets, and everything else. But definitely web technologies make a lot of sense. Databases, so SQL, MySQL, understanding, basic database structure is very, very important. I remember when I went to college in '95, we had to normalize tables. like on paper, right? And obviously that doesn't happen anymore. You just run scripts that optimize the tables. But databases would be a good place to start. iOS, I think, has a lot of free courses, and it makes it very, very interesting. And anything that has to do with web development, front end or back end. So you can start with something simple like HTML and move to JavaScript, and then move to Vue.js and other technologies.
And last but not least, the way I turn my kids onto finance, because they can't tell you the difference between a statement of cash flow, a balance sheet, and a statement of income, and they don't do that. So what I would do with my kids is, if you buy a share of stock, they have to mail you their 10Qs and 10Ks and all that stuff. So anytime they bought something or wanted to do something neat, like Disney World, get them a share of Disney. They wanted to get that PlayStation thing, so you get them a share of the stock. And so that when they would get the mail, and they'd say, hey, the report card on your stock is in, well, they associate that stock with something they're really, really interested in, and I think that's what gave him a love for language. But Stephen Maroulis, thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully after the pandemic, we can hook up in Athens, Greece. God, that place is amazing. And it blows my mind, because when you leave Athens, you go north, Tunisia, that land against the Adriatic Sea is just low cost. You cross that Adriatic Sea into Italy, it's all $1 million an acre. And I was telling everybody at my course in how do you pronounce the capital of Albania? Tunisia or Tunisia? Tunisia. That
which one?
I said, my God, I can assure you, trust me. When you're as old as me, all that land on the ocean, that's all going to be gazillion-dollar land. I couldn't believe the prices of land on the sea in Croatia and Tunisia and all that kind of stuff. I mean, just look at the comp across that. But I think Italy and Greece. I mean, I think where you're born, that was Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. That was just the coolest. That's one of the coolest places on earth. Was it hard to leave that and go to Dallas, where it's just a gas station and a Walmart every 5 miles?
A little bit, but I knew I had to be here. So,
my gosh,
I love this country more than Greece now. And obviously, I've been here for 15 years. I was in London for 10 years, and I was in Greece for 18 years. So it's very hard to, obviously call U.S. home. And my first and only home right now. But yeah, it's hard.
Friends and what is that white sauce? What is that white sauce on Heroes and all that? It's what is that white sauce called?
Oh, tzatziki. I'm gonna send you the recipe. It's very easy. Yogurt.
And they're also the
cucumber, garlic, mint. That's it.
And they're also the what is fish eggs? Caviar. I mean, you eat caviar in Russia only because you're doing vodka shots and you can slam it down and it's all right. But the only people who do caviar where you actually want to eat the caviar and crave it is when the Greeks do it. I mean, Greek caviar is to die for, and it's got to be. And when you come to America, so this is my final plug for one thing. The only Greek restaurants in America that are crushing it, they were born in Greece. And these wannabe Greek people that are Americans and Hispanic and Irish and all that stuff, they just don't get it. So if you ever are talking back home, you just tell them that. I mean, like Phoenix, Arizona right now, I guarantee you 10 new Greek restaurants spread out would go wild. I mean, there's just a difference between real Greek food and fake Greek food. But Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the show, and send your DSO CEO friends on. I truly want to capture their knowledge and get it down to my homies.
You got it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.